Thank you for listening to this episode. Make sure you come back for the next episode covering the points of this conversation.
And follow the podcast on social media by finding @Prestigious_Pod.
Follow me, Mr. Kent, at Mr. Chris R. Kent.
Follow me, Chris Bean, at Chris Bean Official.
Join our Discord for exclusive content and personal interactions.
And if you'd like to be coached on how to live a more prestigious life, you can reach out to me, Chris Bean, on one of my social media platforms, or by emailing the podcast directly at prestigiousInitiative@gmail.com.
Lastly, sign up for our newsletter either through social media or on our website.
This is the Prestigious Initiative. Welcome. I'm Chris Bean, and here with me is Chris Kent. Hello, Mr. Kent.
Hello, sir.
Today we have the pleasure of welcoming a truly inspiring guest, Martin Schoendorfer, a holistic transformational life coach and actor. Hey, Martin, thank you. Thank you for joining us today.
Hey, Chris. Thank you so much for having me.
Martin, so I guess maybe we'll start with your background a little bit. Tell me a little bit about how you got into life coaching, and then about the acting as well. That way we can bring our listeners in so we know who we're talking with.
Sure. So actually, it started out quite early in my life when I was still in high school. I had the opportunity to be a mentor and a mediator for peers my age and younger. So the initial goal was for students who just got to school mid-year or even in the beginning of the year, that they had a go-to person that they can talk to. And when you're that age, very often it's quite difficult to talk to a grown-up because the grown-ups might not understand what you're going through. So I was there for them to support them with any questions, problems they had with teachers or peers or even at home. And that was really inspiring for me because it was not easy, to be honest, because being there, being open, listening to people, it's practice. And nobody back then told me this was something you can do as a career. Back then, everybody was like, yeah, you can be a lawyer, doctor, police officer, but coaching or mentoring was never anything that anyone told us that we can do. So a few years later, I actually got into acting and I moved out to the US. I was in New York for 3.5 years, and then I moved to LA. And especially in acting, because you have to connect so much and on such a deep level with yourself, with your emotions, with what's going on within you, that I kind of didn't know who I was anymore. I had all those questions pop into my mind, like, who am I? What am I doing? Like, what is this life supposed to be like? And that really started my journey into self-development. Especially when I moved out to LA, I participated in a few seminars and workshops, and it was all about self-discovery, self-development. And at that moment, I was like, I remember I did something like that back in high school. And I was like, wow, you can do that? Like, that's something real. And that really started that, like, ignited that spark again within me. I said, I want to pass on that knowledge that I gained about myself. I want to pass on that hope and the tools that I learned, not just through those workshops, but also throughout life, through acting. And then when I moved back to Europe and came to Berlin, I found a fantastic school from London, and I did my coaching training there. And I'm here today, and I'm very, very grateful that all those life experiences led me up to this very moment.
Yeah, and really, what a cool opportunity that you had such early on in high school, that you had that opportunity to mentor and lead those younger students, and then how serendipitous that's where you ended up at. I can imagine that early steps that you took on that path helped to shape and mold you into even seeing that as an opportunity, I would imagine.
Totally, especially because I'm always looking to develop myself further. And I think back then, for me, because I got to know that kind of environment very early on, for me, it was kind of second nature that it's okay to reach out to people. It's okay to have support, because one of the things that I come across so many times in life, not just as a coach, but also when I talk to people in my environment, is, first of all, some people don't even know what coaches do. And second is like having that courage to reach out to someone and say, hey, I want support. And for me, that's never really been an issue. I work with therapists, I work with coaches for many, many years, and that's part of my lifestyle per se. And I feel like that opportunity back then really helped me with a different mindset from that very moment.
Yeah, and I think really a big part of coaching is the empathy and the deep connections that we're able to build with those other humans. And in your coaching, it seems that you help to build that empathy and deep connections not only with humans but with animals, which are fundamental aspects of your coaching philosophy. How do those how do those connections enhance the coaching experience, and what role do they play in personal transformation?
Mhm. So for me, nature is something I feel like we're all part of nature. So if we don't find that connection to other beings except ourselves, then I feel like we're missing out on the fullness what life can give us. So in coaching, I don't work specifically with animals, but I grew up with a dog. We had a cat for only one winter. She came to our house when it was cold and left once it was warm. But animals, well, they were always part of my life. My grandparents had a farm, so it was like from childhood on, I was always surrounded by animals. And for me, that's really, I mean, there are so many people who work with like dogs that really they have like an emotional support, I feel. Like back in when I was in my teens, uh, when I came home sometimes at night and I felt emotional, I was just laying down on the floor next to my dog, put my head on her belly, and I was just like, I just connected with her, and that just calmed me down in such a profound way. And that's why I always feel like uh, creating a connection with animals or with nature that can give us so much calm, so much peace, and I just love it.
Yeah, I think having that extra empathy that because when you have an animal, you have to share. It's not just you that you're helping out, or your family or whatever. But you also have that animal, the dog or the cat or whatever it is. So I think sharing that empathy helps to have that self-reflection where you can have that empathy for yourself because you are allowing yourself to have empathy for another creature.
Mhm. With animals, especially with dogs, because I mean, I've been around a dog for 15 years when I was a kid, and they're kind of like a mirror because when you feel emotional, they sense it. So depending on how you feel, it's always going to be a reflection from their behavior. And I think we can learn so much about ourselves by seeing how do animals react to us because they have some kind of senses that I think we as humans might not possess. So having that also, I mean, of course, you have to be open to reflect on that and say, okay, am I even open to that kind of reflection? But if you are, I think you can really learn from that and see what is really going on within me, or how do I also come across? Because if animals are scared of you, there might be a reason.
Yeah, and well, what a good uh, take on that. I haven't thought about the mirror aspect where the dog per se would reflect my emotions kind of back to me, and so the things I'm going through would be reflected back. But that's good insight. I have not thought about it like that before.
That's a saying that the dog over time similar is similar to the owner, like even the way they walk. It's very, very interesting when you next time you go down the street and you see like someone walking the dog, look at how they're walking. And sometimes it's really similar and it's very, very interesting.
Yeah. Well, So your coaching approach is holistic. You focus on upgrading the self-image and taking inspired action. Can you elaborate on what holistic coaching approach means and how it can empower individuals to create lasting change in their lives?
Totally. So my holistic approach is really about um, let's start differently. Very often in life, when we come across like conversations or situations, it's one-sided. So it's like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And it's not meant like, how do you want to feel? What do you want to experience? But more like, what do you want to do as a career? And if we just look at one area of life and just say, this is kind of like the truth of who I am, then we take away the multitude of experiences that we can have. So what I mean by that is that there's so many different areas of life. It's career, of course, is one connected to that, the financial aspect, but also relationships, personal development, mental health, physical health. So in the center of it all are we as humans. So the way we are, that is always connected to everything that's going on around us. So in every area of life, we play the most integral part because without us, there would not be our life. So when it comes to the holistic approach, the way I always work is that we look at all areas of life in the beginning of a coaching journey, because every or most parts of life, they have an effect on other parts. For example, if financially we're struggling, that might affect the way what we can do in our free time, when like our hobbies, we might need some money for that. If we are not able to come up with that financial abundance to be able to do all that, then we might not feel fulfilled, because we're like, well, there's more to life than what I'm experiencing. I would like to experience more, but I can't. So we're more likely to get into like a lack mentality. If that happens, then it can also affect the relationships around us, because we might not be happy. We might be quite frustrated. So it affects the way we show up at work, the way we show up in a relationship with family, friends. So it has like an impact on so many different areas if just one area is overlooked or kind of neglected. So within the coaching, it's very, very important to look at you as a human being first and see, okay, what is going on within you? What is your habits? What's your belief system? I always say belief system. You have the B and the S, and most of the time it's PS, because there's so many patterns, so many things that are outdated, or that were impressed upon us by someone in our family or from teachers, because early childhood especially, we just soak everything in, and through that so many behaviors can show up later in life. And then looking at it from different perspectives, and showing like the similarities in different situations, different parts of life, different areas of life, it can give you a very, very uh, big understanding of who you actually are, or how you are living your life. Because if we look at specific habits, they might show up in different parts and we're not even aware of it. And what so many times happens is that we make the outside responsible. We say, well, this happened, or that person said this to me. But then if we look at it and be like, okay, in what parts of life does that show up? And then we realize, oh, actually it shows up in different areas of life, that we can start looking at, okay, what is my part in that? How do I show up that this is happening in different areas of life on a continuous basis? Because if we just look at one area, it might be like, well, it could be that the outside is kind of like responsible for it. But if we see a pattern, then it's way more easy to then also change and say, okay, if that's how I show up, if I don't have for example, clear boundaries, or I'm not clear about my values, then I can change that. I can work on that. And then I can also see a transformation in different areas of life.
Yeah, and so really what that speaks to me is the balance, keeping the balance in check, because if one thing is out of balance, then that's going to throw everything else out of balance. And so trying to work that and have equilibrium throughout the different areas of your life will help to have you show up, or the client show up as their true self, despite where they are, because they're in balance of all the different areas.
Absolutely. I'm a huge opponent when it comes to work-life balance, because it gives like the impression that there's life and there's work, but work is part of life. So I totally agree with what you said, where it's about the balance of everything. And that is very, very important that we find that balance, not just within ourselves, but also around us with everything that's been going on.
Well, I think another thing you spoke on was really key is that a lot of times these belief systems are impressed or oppressed onto us by other people. And I see Joe and he's doing this, and I see Sally and she's doing this, and oh, I want to do that, or it's all external things that the individual thinks that they might want, and they're pulling and stretching in ways that are far off from what they actually want for their true selves. But it's hard for them to establish who they are as their true self because of all of the different things that we see, especially nowadays with social media. It's really challenging. And so I guess with that, do you have any tips that somebody could use to help to pull away from the external pressures of society and get back to their true self to help find that balance?
So one thing is that's also important to understand is when it comes to the outside factors, we have something that I call a filter system. So where our mind is the subconscious part and the conscious part of the mind. And within between those two, there's a kind of a filter system. So depending on what we believe, depending on the subconscious programs that have been developed over time, that filter is either open or closed. And if there's and we can train it. It's not set in stone. Like we can create it or change it over time. Of course, it takes practice and clear understanding as well of ourselves. But we can enhance it throughout life at any time. But what that filter does is if you create it in a very powerful way, it can help you filter through the information that comes from the outside, and then kind of not reject, but still kind of reject the information that's coming towards you. Most of the time, it is a choice, honestly, when it comes to social media, when it comes to news. It's a choice to tune into that. It's a choice to open the app and scroll for minutes or hours. And the accounts that you're following, it's a choice to hit follow or not. So many things come down to choices and the choices that we make. And therefore, the first step I always say is to create awareness. Without awareness, and especially conscious awareness, you cannot really change because the fundamental part is missing. Because you cannot change anything where you don't even know what that thing is. So the first step is to create conscious awareness. And then a lot of times what I've come across when I work with people on awareness and changing behavior is that people feel in a rush. That it's like, oh, it's too late in life, or I don't have that much time left, maybe, or whatever the reason may be. But very often we want to be further than we are right now. And that's why I would say after awareness, after you become aware of what is going on, it's important to accept and say, okay, this is the way it is right now, because there is no other way than the way currently in this moment it is. Because I see the present moment as the leftover of the past. So basically everything that happened in the past led us to this moment. What we did in the past hour or the last days also has an impact on how we feel today, how we are feeling physically and mentally. And so the first step is truly awareness and then acceptance. Without those two things, I'm like, you cannot change, especially not with long-lasting effects. And when it comes to like subconscious programs, it's also that awareness plays a huge part in education and in raising kids. I work with quite a few parents, and through their change, they always share how the relationship to their children changes. So with kids, what I realized is because of the subconscious, because when kids are between or younger than around 7, the conscious mind is not yet fully developed, but everything on the subconscious level, they just take on the information. So when you shared before, like when we look at other people, when we look through social media, It's with kids, it's slightly different because with kids, they don't have that conscious awareness. So you don't even have to directly talk to them. Um, I had a conversation not too long ago with one of my family members, and then my niece was not too far away, so she could definitely hear us. And we're talking about the kind of like the freedom kids have, and like the when you're grown up, you know that there's more worries coming up. And I don't remember exactly what the sentence was, but it was something around like, it's so easy to be a kid because when you're grown up, it's so much more difficult. So in that moment, even though I didn't talk to my niece was standing there, and I was like, oh, damn, that could lead to her believing that when she grows up, her life is going to be really difficult. So when I'm around children, I'm very, very conscious of how I talk. When I'm, for example, I'm in summer, I had like a little emotional outburst. I mean, not too big, but I was just like a little bit frustrated. And then I just ignored my nephew. And then when I came back, I was like, hey, I'm sorry that I did that. I just felt a little bit emotional. And I know you didn't do anything. It was not about you. That was all about me not being able to deal with my emotions in that moment. I'm sorry. Even though he might not understand what was going on or didn't even realize it on a conscious level, but I wanted to make sure that on a subconscious level, he's also programmed apologies are okay. It's okay that you're not perfect. You're not always in control of yourself. That happens. We're all humans. And also that it's not about him, that it was not his doing or what he said, but it was about me. And I think that stepping into that acknowledgement of what is your part in the equation goes back to what we talked about earlier. What is my part in it? And creating that awareness. If I didn't start with awareness, if I then didn't accept the situation and accept that this is how I behaved, then I wouldn't have been able to acknowledge it. And
Well,
through that acknowledgement, through those steps, I can change it.
yeah, and well, what a good way to look at it. And by the way, congratulations, good job on going back and apologizing to him for that, because like you said, that goes a long way in sharing that opportunity that hey, it's okay to say sorry, it's okay to to talk about your feelings, especially at that young age, even at the to understand that on the subconscious level if they can't consciously comprehend that in the time. I think that's important to establish, especially for a boy, because then they're going to grow up to be a man, and that's tough for society. The societal pressures that they place on men is tough for them to be in an opportunity to talk about their feelings and to apologize in this day and age. But as you were talking about being aware, that reminded me of something Jordan Peterson talks about, which is to watch yourself like a snake. Like you're hunting yourself, and you do that so that you can see how you act in different areas of your life. Why did you do this? And so like you find those things. Okay, I didn't make good choices here, didn't make good choices here, and then why did those things happen? But as you are consciously watching yourself, you're aware of those things. You're watching yourself from that outside perspective. That sheds a different light on your reasoning behind behind those choices that you make. And so as you were talking about that, it just reminded me of that Jordan Peterson had talked about like that.
I love that. That's a very, very good way to reflect and look at yourself.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, your background as an actor, I have to imagine, has some unique insights into human behavior and emotions. How is can you speak on how that experience has influenced your coaching methods, and how do you help your clients help to tap into their own emotions for their personal growth?
Mhm. So one thing that I've talked a few times about when it comes to like public speaking or even communication in general, before or when I started acting school, I still remember vividly the first time I was on stage for in during acting class, and I was just mumbling words, and I was just like, oh my God, like what is going on? And there was my scene partner. She used the word honeymoon. I had no clue what that meant. So we had to improvise on that scene, and I was like, what am I going to do with that word? So I was like, honeymoon. So it worked in the end for the character, but I was just like the way I showed up, I was just nervous, I was insecure, and I didn't really know what I was doing. And through the through acting classes and through it was a 2-year program, so I really started to work on myself. I honed the craft, and that was it was necessary to really look at myself and pull out the emotion out of myself. Because with that method, it's method acting by Lee Strasberg, and it's really about finding the truth within yourself and then kind of going from inside out instead of outside in. So I had to connect to myself. I had to connect to the painful moments and to past experiences. One of the first classes, well, my teacher said, usually people out there, when something bad happens, they want to forget about it as soon as possible. As an actor, we appreciate that it happened because now we have more tools to work with. And I was like, okay, that's an interesting way to look at it. But then I realized what she meant, and I used experiences from my childhood, from my youth, where I was bullied, where a lot of negative things happened, and I utilized that in order to make the roles that I played more real, because it's all about being real and connect with your scene partner, with the people in the audience, with everybody around you. But that starts with yourself. So what I learned through acting is, first of all, the active listening, because you have to listen to your scene partners. Otherwise, everything just happens up here and you're not really in the moment. And then it's just like a kind of a static kind of way of acting. It doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel like there's any chemistry between the actors. So the more you are in tune with yourself, and the more you can open up to actively listening to the scene partner, the more of a relationship you're going to have on stage, and the more of a connection you have with the people on stage, the more of a connection you're going to have with the audience. At the same time, it's also important to kind of ignore the audience. And I had one play that I did, and the stage was very, very close to the seats. And there was one guy in the first row, and he had his feet up the stage. And that, you kind of have to tune that out. And he was falling asleep as well. But you have to tune that out and be like, okay, it's not about that one person. It's about the play. It's about the rest of the audience as well. But it's really about me giving my best. And that, I think, also helped me for the coaching, to create those filters, to be more in tune with myself and not look so much on the outside. But of course, that's easier said than done, because in acting, there's a frame around it. Pretty much, you have the people come there to see you. You are preparing for it. In real life, barely ever you have time to prepare for whatever is going to happen throughout the day. So it's more likely that that filter is a little bit more open to also negative impulses or input. So with acting, that really helped me later on to connect with my emotions and to support other people to connect to their emotions, to see what is going on within them. And sometimes I use acting exercises. Sometimes I use that for specific situations when it comes to communication, for example. So it's really powerful to combine those things and make my own kind of style from that.
And what an interesting perspective on that too, to take the things that have happened to you and how, essentially, like you said, people nowadays, they want to forget about those negative things that happened. You don't want to deal with the emotions, lock it away, don't worry about it, move on from there. But really, those things if you can look at them in the correct light, will help and will help to shape and mold you into the person who you are more meant to be. But if you take those and you throw those away, then you're missing out on part of you, because despite what you necessarily wanted at the time, those things did happen to you. So if you can take those things and then integrate those into you. I think, as it Carl Jung talks about the shadow work. And so they take those negative aspects of you, integrate that into to you as the person, and that will help to link up and create balance and put you on the path that you really are meant to be. And so it sounds like from that acting exercise, you're able to take those things and not throw them to the wayside, but integrate those into who you are. And then you help your clients to do that as well.
It's a very thin line, I think, when it comes to the past, because of course what can happen is that when we look into the past, that we get stuck in the past and that it affects us emotionally, mentally, and that also has an effect on where we're going to go next and how we're going to show up in life, or if in the end we will show up in life again. So it's very, very like that. Finding that balance, like you said, is very, very important also when it comes to how much am I looking into the past? How much do I utilize from those experiences? On the other hand, of course, if we just pretend it didn't happen, then we suppress it. And suppression usually leads into very negative feelings, depression, or whatever the individual might go through when they suppress. But so it's neither nor. Is if it's too much, then it's always you're usually ending up in a negative experience. So it's important to be able to look at it and be like, okay, how can I utilize it? Because I believe it's important to look into the past, or when there was traumatic experiences. He has definitely worked with someone, especially with therapists who are qualified to work with trauma experiences. But it's important to look at, okay, does that really impact me? And if it does, how can I work through it so that I can go forward with a more positive outlook? If we hold on to it, it's always like a chain that's holding you back. So it's that balance again that I feel like that's our work today, balance. It always comes back to that we find a way to look into the past and utilize it, see what can I use from it, how can I learn from that experience and become a better person or a better version of myself. So in that way, I feel like when we look at the past as an opportunity to learn and grow, then no matter how negative the experience might have been, but in the end, it still is going to be something positive because we take something from it and we grow. And for me, that is the way I look at the past. Of course, there are things where I'm like, I wish they hadn't happened, but then I reflect on it and I'm like, well, I'm kind of happy I did, because that gave me more tools for acting and for coaching that I can utilize. And I don't know who I would be today if even one experience hadn't happened the way it did.
Yeah, and I think you're right. You have to make sure those are in line with what you want, and trying to keep in balance. Like you said, is you have to look at those things through positive lenses, like you're looking through glasses of positive lenses to think, okay, this negative thing happened, but let me put my positive glasses on. How can I look at this? What positive can I take from this? How can I apply that to my life? And where can I put this in order to incorporate this and learn and grow into the person I want? Because like you said, I can think back on many negative things that happened to me in the past, or at least seemingly negative at the time. But you're right, without those things that happened to me, I would be a vastly different person today than I was without those. And so if I would take those and just throw those to the wayside, I would be so much different. And not that I can say that I've done that super well and reflected on those and incorporated those, amazing, but tried. And I think that is the key, is you want to try to look at those things and keep your positive glasses on. What positiveness can I help to apply and keep my life in balance as I move forward? So I think you're right on. You got to look at it with positive eyes, with the intent to learn and grow from those things.
One thing that just popped up when you mentioned the glasses is because as a coach, very often I come across people like, oh, you're one of those people who just say everything is fantastic and you're just like, thumbs up and positive, positive, positive. I'm like, no, sometimes life sucks. Excuse my language, but sometimes it does. So I'm not shying away from experiencing what I'm experiencing. And especially when it comes to grief. I just had a client where we talked about grief and loss. And like, you have to feel it. You cannot look at it and be like, oh, what can I learn from that? How can I grow from that? No, let it happen, let it be. And see it also, I mean, it is something positive because it means that someone meant something to you. But it's not about just always saying everything is fantastic, everything is great, because that would just be an illusion. It's not true. So being able to also say, this is not the way I want it to be. I don't like what's happening right now. That's also very, very powerful and far from that kind of lens of an illusion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that directly ties into what you mentioned earlier and being aware. So you're being aware of what you're going through, what's going on, and also the accepting. Like you said, sometimes things are just tough because they're tough. Sometimes things are tough and you can learn something from it. But rather than lying to yourself, you're aware of what you're going through, you're aware of the circumstance, and then you accept it, and it can help you move forward from there. So it's just cool how all of it kind of ties in, and there's so many different aspects to it. But it's great to hear your perspective on that too.
Thank you. Yeah, it's that connection. That's why I also love holistic coaching, because that way there's everything is possible within it, because there's no right, wrong. It's just an individual experience. And then, yeah, I support like how to make sense of that and how to make life the best experience possible.
Now, I'm sure in your coaching experience, you have helped your clients through some common challenges. How can you share, maybe you don't have to, obviously don't tell me any specifics, you can't do that, but how do you help your clients, how do you guide them in overcoming these obstacles, in order to achieve their aspirations?
One of the most common things that I've come across is when people start working with me that they've never met anyone who was just there to listen to them, to understand them, and not judge them. And I think you don't even need to be a coach in order for you to be able to do that. If we all took that to heart and say, how can I show up a little bit more mindful when I talk to other people, but also with ourselves? How can I be more kinder to myself, a little bit gentler, and not so much pressure and yeah, just more gentle. And that's like one of the most common things that I've seen, and people continuously thank me for just being able to be themselves and to being able to share what's going on with them. And I think especially through my background as an actor, but also through my life experiences, that is something I want to give to people. I want to be there for them. I want to create that room where they can be themselves and use that room also to figure out who they want to become. And of course, that is like again, a balance of how much room is there for listening and the understanding part, and then where to also push a little bit and say, okay, how do you move forward from that? So it's really the fine tuning and empathy that's important to have in order to understand what does the person in front of me need right now, because very often they don't know. They don't know what they need. They just know what's going on, or they might be aware of what's going on, but they don't know what they need from me. So it's that kind of skill that I needed to learn as a coach to figure out what is the person in front of me, what can they benefit from the most, what can I offer in that moment? Is it the active listening, or is it more a little bit, okay, let's interrupt those thoughts, let's interrupt those thought patterns, because especially when I work with someone over time, I realize like what if there's certain things that they continuously doing. If they, for example, start talking and it's an open-ended speech where there's no point like to it. So it's like, okay, how can we interrupt that when it shows up so that we interrupt it in the beginning and not like after half an hour? And that's also like rapport is needed. If you don't build rapport, if you don't build trust, you cannot tune into that. So I hope that answers your question. With because I mean I can of course make like anonymous examples as well, but I feel like those topics are mainly what shows up a lot.
Yeah, I think you hit it right on, and something that I'll bet a lot of coaches miss, especially new coaches, is they miss that empathy. And you talked about creating that rapport with your client. I think the empathy is the path by which that trust is built. Because if you can set up an atmosphere for your client where you have that judgment-free zone, and it's truly a judgment-free zone, then they will feel free to let their guard down, and instead of telling you things that are base level, they'll get to the root, help you really by them get through to the root cause of whatever the actual issue is. But that can only happen through empathy and that building of rapport and trust. And I think that, like you said, building that judgment free zone where they're free to share what they're really going through is key for that.
When you just shared that, it kind of reminded me also of the acting experience again, because in acting, it's so important to focus on yourself and be not affected also by what's going on in your real life in that moment. Because when you're on stage, of course, you're connecting real life experiences, but if you're in a comedy and then outside of acting, something happened that was very negative, of course you try to implement it into the play or into the movie. But at the same time, it's important to be like, okay, how can I shift? How can I shift and focus what's going on right now in this moment? And also the coach, it's important to not focus on my own things in that moment, but opening up and being there and fully present with who is across me, sitting across me. Because if I'm just stuck in my own ways, and I think especially when coaches start out, they're thinking so much about. I mean, that was my experience when I started. I was thinking so much about like, am I asking the right questions? How do I come across? Do I speak correctly? Like, am I sitting in a way where the language doesn't say anything about like how I might feel, or so many things happened on a conscious level in that moment. And through experience, and I think experience is really something that you cannot take away experience. It's something that you need to go through in order to also grow. And through experience, I those thoughts like completely disappeared. Here and there, they pop up, but usually I take that as an opportunity to be like, why does it pop up with that client and not someone else? And then, of course, if it happens more often, then I'm looking into myself and be like, okay, do I really want to work with that person? But yeah, I always take it as an opportunity to reflect and tune into myself after that happens.
Yeah, and I think being aware of yourself in those moments is I would imagine something that's quite challenging to do, because you're, like you said, you're actively listening to what the other person's doing, but then on top of that you have another layer that you're consciously aware of what your body is doing and how you're being perceived by them, so that you can allow them to let their guard down enough to share with you that thing that is really bugging them, so that you can help them. And so I'm sure there's a little bit of I mean, it's sort of a game almost that you have to play with yourself and with them in order to help them in the best way you can.
There's an exercise that I always share when it comes to when emotions come up, but it's not the appropriate time. And I utilize that as well when I feel like, okay, there's something going on right now, but it's not the space for me to express those emotions. And that usually comes up when I'm in a coaching session where it's about the other person. I'm like, this is not about me. This is about the other person, and this is not the right space. So there's like I create kind of like a mental closet. So it's like a mental shelf, and I imagine myself putting whatever I'm feeling right now, whatever the situation might be that I'm thinking about or that affects me. I imagine myself putting that in a box, labeling it so that it's not like just a random box somewhere. putting it into the shelf and saying, I will come back to you. Don't worry, I'm not, ignoring you. You're not going to stay there by yourself forever. I'm going to come back to you, but I will choose the time when it's appropriate. That way, of course, it's not gone. It's still there, but at least I gave myself the permission to look at it later without having to suppress it. Because if I don't do that, then I'm more trying to suppress what's going on. And that means the focus is on me suppressing it and not me on focusing on the other person. But with that mental exercise, a few seconds that it takes, it doesn't take away from me creating that space. But also, if of course, I mean, I'm always a fan of not just preaching in a sense, but also living what I'm preaching. So for me, it's all about vulnerability. So when it comes to emotions, or sometimes when I didn't sleep well and I feel like physically I have an effect, or it affected me physically, when I wake up in the morning and I have a coaching session, I would share that. I don't shy away from sharing how I feel or what's going on with me, because I feel like my clients have a right to know. They have a right to know what's going on in that very moment with me, because they might look at me like, whoa, he looks like he didn't sleep at all tonight. But if I share, hey, mentally, I'm here 100%, physically, my body is probably looking a little different today, but I'm still able to focus 100% on you. That also creates the space, first of all, for them to show up vulnerably, because they're like, oh, he's showing up vulnerably. But at the same time, it eradicates kind of like the issues that could arise if they feel like I'm not there. I had a therapist who didn't do that. He was always yawning, but he tried to hide it. So he was like sitting across me with like a long face, and I was just like, just say you're tired. But this felt always like, especially it happened every time. So but for me, it's like if that happens to me, of course I don't say it every single time, but most of the time I'm sharing when something is going on with me, because I feel like that's important to live that.
Yeah, and like I think what you said was right on, is because you're sharing those things, then they would be more likely to share those things. And might I add too that visualization exercise where you talked about putting your feelings in the box, labeling the box, and then putting that up on the shelf, and then allowing yourself, hey, I'm not leaving you forever. I'll come back to you, but now is not the time. Thank you for sharing that. That's a good tool that I think almost anybody can implement at any given time. That was very good.
Happy you resonate with it. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah. Speaking of visualization, I think visualization is such a profound tool that people can use. And I'm just curious, how do you help individuals define their vision, and what strategies do you use to ensure that it aligns with their values and their passions?
It comes back to the holistic approach, because in the beginning of every coaching journey that I do an exercise called the Wheel of Life, and it really helps looking at all the different areas. And that Wheel of Life also helps to create values, or to become clear values, where it's like, okay, what is important? What's important within that area? Also, what is important that is happening in all areas of your life. I always share examples, because often people don't know what values are or how to make sense of it. And I'm like, for example, a core value for me is honesty. So for me, in every part of life, if it comes to friendships or with my clients, honesty is for me very, very important. But also with finances, I want to be able to trust and be honest with my accountant, and I want him to be honest with me. I don't want there any dishonesty happening, because that will create some issues in the future, and some negative experiences down the line. So honesty is for me something that needs to be happening and be present in all areas. Intimacy, not so much. Intimacy is for me important in relationships, but when I work with clients or when I work with my accountant, it's not intimacy, especially on a physical level. It's not for me something that needs to or should be at all happening in that space. So through those three examples, it's like, okay, one is really for one area of life, the other one is for all areas of life. So if you look at the wheel of life, we can really start separating, be like, okay, where do those values fit? And then how can I implement them? How can I communicate them? How can I create boundaries with them? And boundaries usually start within yourself again, but then being able to communicate those boundaries with others. And that's also something that I work with or work on with people when when it comes to values and boundaries, how to communicate them so that you can also let other people know what you stand for. And if they cross your boundaries, that you're like, no, that's not going to happen again. So yeah, that also plays part like with the holistic approach.
Okay, so values. I really think value based approach to all of this life success, life growth, self development, personal development, all those things. Values are really what is the key to making sure it aligns with who you are. The hard part that I've found is people have either they have no concept of what values are. They don't know, they don't know what their values are. They don't even know what values, what are you talking about values? So I guess my question is the way that I think about values is a little bit different than how you think about values. I can see already. And I guess my question is, what is an exercise that you do with your clients to help them to find, you talked about the wheel of life and you know, my basic understanding is the wheel of life. You have work and you have your, health and, another what is it, financial health, wealth, and love or something like that in the circle. Then you kind of expand that circle out, and what are the what values do you place on that? Like how high is work, and how high is that what you mean by the life spheres, the life circle?
So
I
with
didn't really ask a question. I'm sorry.
all good. So with the wheel of life, it's what you said, work, relationships, hobbies, or I call it also like purpose-free activities, where it's just where the only purpose is fun. Then family, like attitude, personal development. Like there's pretty much every area of life that you can think of. Sometimes I add areas that might not be important to others. I'm like, okay, if we take it out of the wheel of life. I'm like, if that's something that is absolutely not important for you, of course we can change it. But with values, it's like what is important within that area. So within relationships, for example, what is important? How do you want your partner to be? How do you want to show up? What qualities need to be present for you to say this is a relationship that I want to be in. Um, so it's for me the work. I mean, there's different ways to go about it. The way I work with it is very much through conversation. So it's not. I mean, I use sometimes lists where there's like values written down, and to get like an inspiration from that. Especially when someone has never worked with values, then that might help them also to get a little bit inspired by that. But it's mostly through conversations. And I very often hear it when people talk about what they want to achieve or what their vision is, what their goals are. I can hear already what might be important to them because they often are not aware of what they're sharing, but the especially when you're emotionally connected to something, you might not be aware of the exact words you're using. And then as a coach, it's also my job to filter out things, not just what they say, but how they say it, and then reflect it and say, okay, this is what I heard. This is what showed up here. This is what showed up here, and then have like a discussion around that.
Okay, and so I think, and you said that the values are the things the things that are important to them. I think that's the key, and that's I see the importance for that, and I guess even the way you go about setting that up, that's much clearer on that now. It's similar to how I think about values in that regard, and so when I think about values, I make a list of things that are most important for if it was for me. If I make a list of things that are most important to me, like I'm a parent, and think about like the different hats that I wear through the day. So I'm a parent, I'm a husband, I work, and I have this podcast, and all these things, and I put down the different hats that I have through the day, and then that's kind of the first exercise, and then the next exercise is, okay, what is, of those 5 or 8 different areas of my life, what is most important? I rank order those. Okay, this is most important, and then this one, and so on down, and then the next exercise would be, okay, why? Which I think is really impactful, is, why is this most important? Why do I value this? And then why and why and why for all of the things that I have on my value list. And then the last step is to create a affirmation that goes with each of those values, each of those areas of my life that is linked to a why. So, if for example, I'm a parent, and so one of my affirmations is, I'm the best father in the world. That may not always be the case, but that's my affirmation. And then I have a reminder that I set for different times of the day, different times of the week, or even month, depending on what they are, where that value will ding on my watch or my phone. Oh yeah, that's right, I am the best father. Pow, I can check that, and then that's that positive affirmation being reminded to me in the time that I wanted it to. I'm pulling the strings a little bit, but then that allows me to fulfill on that affirmation. And so it's a multi-step approach, and it's not too different from what you are, but I'm not using honesty and integrity and those type of value-based word, but I'm linking it to the areas of my life specifically that are linked with a why that was created by me, or whoever I go through this with. Have you heard or experienced something like that previously?
I love what you shared with the why, because without a why, there's, especially when there's adversity or when something doesn't go according to how you might think it might have worked in a different life. um, it's without the why, it's very easy to give up. And what you shared, I think it's very powerful, where it's like, okay, what is most important to me? What is really going on within me? How do I want to show up? And affirmations, I love affirmations. I have a slightly different approach to affirmations, but it's affirmations are just incredible.
I fully agree. Yes. Yes. Well, hey, Martin, I want to tell you, thank you. Thank you for sharing such valuable insights with us today. Your holistic approach to coaching, focused on human connection and passion, really is empowering others and truly inspiring. Before we wrap up, I just wondered, do you have any final thoughts or key takeaways to share with our audience today?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me and for this discussion. I always get inspired when I meet people like you, and uh, can share insights and opinions, and that's truly a pleasure and honor for me. And yeah, so what I always love telling people is, like, find your balance, find your inner strength. When it comes to life choices, make sure that you have a clear vision. As you said before, have a clear why, because without the why, it's going to be difficult. And making decisions based on your goals, based on your vision, is going to be way more effective and easier than just making a decision based on the circumstances that you find yourself in. And don't give up. Don't give up. There's always a way to move forward. There's always a new path that you can create. The past does not have to define you. It does not have to tell you what the future is. The past is not the prediction of the future. The past can enhance where you're going, but it's in the end your choice, and you have the power within you to create the life that you truly want.
And Martin, if our listeners wanted to get in contact with you, or to learn more about you, where could they go to do that?
The best way to connect with me, I have a private Facebook group where I really created like a community of like-minded people. It's called Embrace Your Vulnerability and Live with Purpose. And you can find me there, also under my name, Martin Maximilian Schoendorfer. So yeah, connect with me there. Would be a pleasure to grow my community there.
Very good. And I'll be sure to leave those links in the show notes as well. Listeners, hey, be sure to connect with Martin for that transformational coaching experience. And that concludes our episode of the Prestige Initiative. Stay tuned for more inspiring conversations, and thanks for listening.